Today on Biblical Higher Ed Talk, I sit down with David Dockery, president of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, to talk about his leadership experiences, lessons we can learn from a significant thought leader in biblical and theological education. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm your host, Philip Dearborn, president of ABHE, and you are in for a treat today. For today's episode, we have quite a guest with us, somebody that many of you know, and we're going to get into that actually in the episode itself. But David Dockery, he's the president of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. And in the world of biblical and theological education, even Christian liberal arts education, David Dockery is somebody that I am almost certain our listeners know, whether it's through his books or whether it's through his vast leadership experiences at a number of different institutions. So we're blessed to have you on the show, and certainly want to give a word of welcome to you, David.
Oh, thank you, Philip. Thank you for this invitation. I'm looking forward to our conversation today and just grateful to be able to renew friendship with you in this process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to get into some specific questions because I just want to pick your brain about what you've seen in leadership, your leadership experiences. What are some good traits of presidential leadership? What are some of the mistakes to avoid? We'll talk a little bit even about IACE and your leadership with that. But to just start us off, tell us about a formative leadership experience in your life.
Yeah, well, I was very privileged as a college student at the University of Alabama. Not a school that belongs to ABHE or IACE for sure.
Not yet anyway, right?
But I had the privilege of working in the athletic department as a student. All 4 years I was in Tuscaloosa, I worked in the athletic department. And I look back on those years now with great gratitude, appreciation, reflection, that I was in the presence of two amazing leaders. Coach Paul Bryant on football side won 6 national championships and was an amazing leader. But I worked more closely with the basketball team and worked with Coach C.M. Newton, who also was a Hall of Fame coach on the basketball side and won 3 SEC championships during my time there in the 70s. And I got to watch both of them. They're very different kind of personalities. And so I watched Coach Bryant and I learned some things from him. One, I didn't have his personality. And so you had to be, live within yourself. I think one of the first things you have to learn, you can't try to be somebody else. But he was a person very committed to planning and planning carefully, gaming things out, thinking strategically, having contingency plans for any and every situation. So I think if you go back and look at what I've done at Union University up until now, even at Southwestern, we've been guided by strategic plans. And I think I learned at least the importance of planning, not how to do it, but the importance of planning from Coach Bryant. But working with Coach C.M. Newton is where I really picked up some things that I have borrowed and used for many, many years. And Coach Newton was a very different kind of person than Coach Bryant. He was very people-focused, very relational, very inclusive, whether it was the All-Americans on the team or those that sat at the end of the bench, those like myself who was a student worker who, came along to help on the side, the assistant coaches, the graduate assistants, everybody was a part, and he treated everybody with care and love and appreciation, respect. And I think I learned the importance of caring for people, being people-focused in how you carry out the work, and understanding that it takes a team to accomplish leadership objectives at any size entity or institution. And so I was privileged as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old person, had this front row seat of these 2 Hall of Fame coaches and to observe their lives and to observe their leadership and picked up lessons that could apply. And I think most of it was unconscious because I never had any idea at the time I would be in a leadership role. But I look back upon it now and see how those principles have characterized what I've tried to do, not to the degree or the effectiveness that either of them did, but at least those are some things that I learned. So talk about formative leadership, that, where did it begin? I think that's where it started for me as a university student in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Were you ever able to go back to those two and express to you how formative they were in
With
your
Coach,
leadership?
yes, with Coach Newton, I was able to do that and able to thank him for his influence in my life. Actually had him come to the Union University campus, spend a couple of days there for him to observe what had taken place. He even spoke to our board of trustees about some principles that might be helpful for our athletic program. So yes, I was able to thank him and for him to see how some of those things had been translated in our work there.
So just curious, so you went to secular university. Were you a Christ follower at 18, 19?
During my sophomore year at the University of Alabama, I had a
Huh.
recommitment of my life to Christ. I was privileged to be raised in a Christian home, went to church regularly. My parents were faithful church attenders. My dad was a deacon in the church. I learned Bible stories from my mom, involved in all the youth group and Bible drill kind of thing. So I was very much immersed in church. But a very serious commitment to Christ came my sophomore year at the university through the work of Campus Crusade for Christ, now called CRU, and involved in campus Bible studies. The next year, I went to a summer-long program called Institute for Biblical Studies, where I learned to study the Bible seriously for the first time, had some of my first real doctrine apologetic courses, able to come back and share my faith more boldly and informatively on the campus. And so those sophomore and junior year experiences at the University of Alabama were very, very formative for me.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your major?
Yeah, I went to be a journalism major. I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. I wanted to sit in front of a microphone like that one that you have there, but
Yeah.
I wound up being a journalism minor and hopeful that I might be able to be an educator at some level. So I moved into education, not thinking it's going to be in higher education. Again, as a 19, 20-year-old, you can't see very far down the road. At least I couldn't. I wound up as an education major and a journalism minor.
Yeah. And it is so important for us to realize, and I've mentioned this on the show before with other guests, because it's typical for guests to reflect back on their formative years in college, that 18 to 20, which is really why you and I are involved in the work that we are, because the opportunity that we have to pour into students' lives at that age, they're still formative.
No, it's an amazing opportunity. I came back from that summer experience and
Yeah.
52 years ago now,
Hmm.
and said to the Lord, I want to study the Bible like I've learned how to do and teach it to others if you'll give me that privilege. I couldn't imagine being much more than teaching high schoolers at the time, but now the Lord's given me opportunity to teach some amazing institutions and to do that across the country and around the world as well. I'm ever grateful, but those years were so formative for me.
Yeah.
I still live out of what
Wow.
happened in my life more than 50 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've mentioned it that you've been involved in a number of different institutions in various leadership roles and kind of keeping that sports idea going. Like when I run into people, it's almost like just like you have in professional football, the coaching trees, right? Of different head coaches who have hired assistant coaches, and they all kind of trace back to just a handful of really good head coaches. And I kind of put you in that category of people that have served with you in different positions, and they have gone on and become presidents at other institutions. So everywhere I go, it feels like somebody is connected in with you or served with you at some point. So you've had a front row seat to observe effective and perhaps ineffective leadership. So share with us what you would see as 3 traits necessary for presidential leadership. And then the flip side of that, share with us 3 critical mistakes or pitfalls for presidents to avoid. So let's start on the positive side. What are 3 necessary traits for effective presidential leadership?
Yeah, I think those are very important questions and very thoughtful ones. I think it's very important for leaders to recognize that they serve with others,
Mm-hmm.
that you're part of a team. God has gifted you with certain gifts and abilities that comes with strengths and weaknesses. Recognizing what gifts you don't have, what the weaknesses are, the kind of people you need to be a part of the team to help advance that work is vital. So I think understanding yourself, understanding your giftedness, understanding that you're part of a team effort. It's not all about you. So I think that's very, very important for people to recognize. I think sometimes we're a little too egocentric in how we approach these things or talk about it with, too much of a first person pronoun. It's more of a we than it is an I. Secondly, I think and probably this should have been first, but I understand the mission and the culture and the history, the heritage of an institution. Make sure it's, the mission is biblically based. I think the third thing, I mean, this list could be very long. Three is hard to prioritize, but three, I think, is to try to project a trajectory, a direction, a vision for an institution so that everyone understands where we are and where we're going. And that comes back to the planning process so that you help people see here's where we are today, but here's where we want to be 2 years from now. Here's where we want to be 3 years from now. Here's some things we're working on together. Here's some things that are important, but we can't work on those right now because they're not part of our priority list. And so I think focusing on the mission, building a team, understanding yourself in light of that team, and then finding direction and vision, trajectory for the institution. I would put those pretty high on the list. There's others that could be added, but I'll stop at three.
Well, and to me, I love the simplicity of those. And the more I observe leadership, even in myself and what my leadership traits are, sometimes we make things a little bit too complicated when it comes to leadership. Those three things in themselves on the surface appear to be simple and basic, but are incredibly deep. It starts with a leader, right? If a leader it's about them, it's about their notoriety, their opportunity that they have to express who they are and use it as a platform. And it's all me, and it's not the team that's doing this. That's problematic. If a president is misaligned with the mission of the institution and is not able to get that mission clearly grounded in the word of God, there's a problem there. And not having momentum when a president walks into a situation and status quo is killer. You have to constantly be saying, where are we going? And because that becomes a filter, right? To choose not to do certain things or to choose to do other things. I think if leaders got those three things right, our institutions all of them would be flourishing.
Yeah, I think you're right that they are simple, but not simplistic.
Yes.
And they're foundational. And all the other things you might try to do, if you don't have those things right, nothing else will work. It will crumble. It'll get sidetracked. It becomes silo-ish.
Yep.
So I think these things are wide, broad, deep. They cover everyone. I think coming back to these over and over again, very important. I love athletics, so forgive me for having athletic analogies. Coach John Wooden was another outstanding coach and leader. He won 10 national championships in 12 years at UCLA. And you would think that the first thing they would do when they would come back to begin practice again at the beginning of each year is talk about that national championship, how we're going to repeat. First day of practice every year, they didn't even pick up a basketball. They learned how to put on their socks, the inner socks on first, then the outer socks so they didn't get blisters. Learn how to put on their shoes, double knot their shoes, make sure you didn't waste a time out with a shoe that comes off. Deal with basic things. And he did it year after year after year, never assumed, even after he'd won 10 national championships. So I think coming back to the foundation over and over is vital to successful and effective leadership.
Amen. So flip the page now. So we talked about some of the critical things that you have to have in place. As you've observed mistakes or pitfalls in presidents or in perhaps even in your own leadership experiences, give us your top three critical mistakes that are made.
Yeah, I think the first thing that people do, especially younger leaders, I was in my 30s when I became provost at Southern Seminary. I was 42 when I was invited to become president at Union University. I'm an old guy now, so 72 years old, and been around the block probably one or two many times, but God has given me amazing privilege to kind of think about some of those things. But I think when you're young, you're eager, you want to, make sure you can rush into things and make a difference quickly. And I think that's a mistake that people make. They try to move too too fast, try to do things too quickly without understanding the situation, understanding the people, understanding the institution's heritage and how you can make a difference in that place. There's not a one size fits all to leadership. Institutions are contextually defined. Their heritage, their history, their constituencies are different. So you need to understand those things. I think people fail to grasp that going in.
Yeah.
They move too quickly.
That's a real tension, isn't it? And tensions aren't bad. That you learn to manage the tensions because on the one hand, as a leader, you do want to be forward thinking and moving the organization. So you're trying to find that sweet spot of
Yeah,
what's too much and what's too little.
you don't want to use it as an excuse to do nothing, that's for sure. But I think without understanding the context, you're doomed for failure. Chuck Swindoll, one of my favorite preachers, left Dallas Seminary and went to a church up in New England, and the church died. And then Chuck Swindoll went to the West Coast, Southern California, and one of the great churches that we know of was built under his preaching ministry there. And he talks about the contextual difference. He learned, of course, in the process of some things he did in one place and as opposed to another. But I think understanding the context and recognizing institutional fit is vital for leadership. Secondly, and very closely related, is as you plan, have the right clock. I tell young leaders all the time that you'll be amazed at how much can be accomplished in 5 years if you think of it within a 5-year framework. So a lot of people try to do 5 years within one. You'll probably be surprised at how little can be done in 1 year and how amazed you can be at what can be done in 5. The third thing would be one of the flip sides of what I said as a positive: stay focused on the mission. There are going to be a lot of things that come along that detract you from the mission. Somebody comes up with a great idea, think, well, let's go and do this. And it might be a good thing for somebody else to do, but it's not what you can do in your context and your situation. I think if you read James Burchell's wonderful book on the dying of the light, published back in the mid 1990s, his thesis, I'm not sure he gets every situation right, but his overall thesis is right on target. And that is, as soon as institutions lose their relationship with the churches, the light begins to go out on the campus. I don't think anybody of all those situations that he goes through, and he goes through denomination by denomination by denomination of institutions that lost their mission, lost their theological compass, lost their way. No president, no board member came to campus and said, how can we undo the mission today? That's not what happens. It's just you make a decision here, you make a decision there, incrementally. You move off target. You're not heading due north anymore. And you look back and all of a sudden you're heading in the wrong direction. And so I think remain mission focused, evaluate every decision, every personnel issue in light of mission, and that will avoid many, many mistakes.
Yeah. It's called mission creep for a reason. It's sneaky because sometimes a decision that you make, you don't think that this could potentially impact mission or direction. It seems like the right thing to do. Why wouldn't we do this? But yet, unchecked, that could deviate you one degree off of mission. And then you make another decision off of that one. And before you know it, you are off mission.
It happens without understanding, certainly without malintention, but you have to have people around you who can help you see these things, not just make pragmatic decisions for the short term, but try to understand their longer term implications. I think all of us who've been in leadership for some time can point to things, oh, that was not the right thing to do at that time. We pull it back today if we could, but somehow God in his kindness and in his providence helps to protect us and overrule us, our own foolishness from time to time.
And we're thankful for that. We are definitely thankful for that. You're president of Southwestern, a significant Southern Baptist seminary, and you've been leading well there. I have a bit of a bias in the question I'm going to ask because it assumes that things need to change in biblical and theological education. You may or may not agree with that, but assuming you do agree, what are you seeing from your seat? What do we have to change methodology-wise in our approach to biblical and theological education?
I think it's some things for which we need to change, some things to which we need to respond, if I could try to answer
Okay.
the question that way.
Yeah.
This is my 41st year in Christian higher education, my 30th year in related to a presidential work. And I've never seen so many things at one time, so many things coming at us, so many challenges. We've often had one or two here and there, but now it seems like we have the, economic issues, globalization issues, we have accreditation issues with the Department of Education. We have denominational, ecclesiological kind of issues. We have multiple generations that have different understandings of what they want or think they need when they come to our campus, either as employees or students. So we have all these things that are addressing us in addition to cultural and legal issues that we seem to kind of have to fend off the time. So I think what needs to happen is, one, we need to not change the mission, and two, to change in the areas we need to respond to several of these things. And I would say particularly the economic, financial one. I don't think any of us have figured out how to get the right business model that works for what will be the second quarter moving to the middle of the 21st century. Most of us are still working off of kind of a 1980s business model, and how to address the business models in a way that does not negatively impact the mission. That's where I see the tension really high for a lot of people right now. Understanding globalization issues. I mean, Southwestern perhaps is more global than others. We're 25, 26% international students, but I don't know anybody that does not have a larger percentage of international students than they had 10 or 15 years ago, which is a great thing. It's a great opportunity. It's a way for us to take the gospel to the nations by preparing those students who come our way. But the dynamics on campus are different because of that. And so figuring out how to address those and change in the appropriate ways that help us serve our students well, I think is very, very key. So I think we have to look at all of these issues that are surrounding us, and I would probably name a dozen pretty quickly, and try to respond to each one in the right way, make the kind of changes that we need to make in ways that do not change or affect the mission. That's the tension in which leaders live in 2025. I think it's different than it was
Yeah.
30 years ago.
Yeah, and I've had the privilege of being in this industry for over 30 years, so I know exactly what you're talking about. From the business model that worked, post GI Bill was really the one of the main catalysts that shaped the business model for how we approach higher education today at all levels. 30, 40, 50 years later, that model is not necessarily working. Like, is somebody just going to suddenly figure it out at one of our institutions and that becomes the business model moving forward? And maybe we can talk a little bit about IACE and the role that IACE could play in shaping, what that future business model looks like. Like, how do we even tackle something like that?
We can't forget that we are educational entities. We're not a business.
Mm-hmm.
We're educational entities that have to work by faithful business principles. Our goal is not to make money, but we can't function if we lose money. I think, we're not a for-profit entity. And so we've had these for-profit educational entities move into our space over the last 30 years with a very different business model. And I think there are some things we can learn from it, but I think we also have to realize that they are businesses more than they are educational entities. And so we want to be very careful how we manage those things. It's very important for boards to understand, as leaders work with boards, particularly those who come to us from the business world. They have much to offer us, but we have to constantly, while we're trying to learn from them, remind them that nonprofit educational entities are distinct and different than businesses, different than churches, different than hospitals, different than nonprofits in the community. We have a very unique space, and we're called to do a unique thing. So we have to keep the educational piece first and foremost while finding a business model that will support it. that helps advance that mission and not detract from it or weaken it. It needs to strengthen it and not weaken it. And I have these conversations regularly, and I think we're all wondering, when's the breakthrough going to happen? But it's slow in coming, I think.
It is. And one of the things that you do, I know through IACE, is how's it going to happen? It's going to happen through collaboration. I think gone are the days that one entity or one organization or one denomination or one seminary or one Bible college or one university is going to be the model for everybody else. It's going to be something that's collaboratively done. And I know IACE provides a platform where a lot of these kinds of conversations that will shape what the future looks like becomes a place to have those conversations, right?
Yes, that's one of the reasons that we exist. We recognize that we're facing similar challenges, not just in the Christian liberal arts world, not just among seminaries, not just among gap year programs, not just among K through 12 schools, not just among Bible colleges. We're all in this together. The second word in our name is alliance, is an attempt to build some alliances and to attempt to create opportunities for mutual learning, create projects, partnerships in which we can work together collaboratively and cooperatively for the good of the whole. We all will do better together than we will, trying to knock each other off. And so I think the days of competition, while it's kind of inherent in what we do, that has to become secondary. You have to look for things that will advance the overall work, be very kingdom-minded in how we seek to approach these things. And through collaboration, I think we can find ways to hold hands together, to live out of that Philippians 1 model, being shoulder to shoulder for the sake of the gospel.
I wish we had a whole nother episode that we could talk further about this, but we've come to the end of this one, and we have a minute left. In this last minute, especially for people like you who have such a distinguished career, having served as a president, I think you said, for over 30 years, and in this industry for 40 plus years. We see you very much as somebody who has gone before us and we can emulate and model. So what would be one last word of advice? A lot of young listeners on our podcast who are in their leadership journeys at their institutions. What's one last word of advice that you'd like to leave with them?
Yeah, well, it will sound redundant given some things we said earlier today, but mission faithfulness is the key. I think to understand how to bring Christ-centered convictions, not just our piety, but Christ-centered convictions and academic seriousness together to advance the shared mission that can strengthen churches, advance the kingdom, prepare men and women for God's calling on their life to make a difference, take the gospel to the nations. I think we have to remain focused on the mission, even as we do all the other things that God allows us to do in this space. Don't lose sight of the first thing, the most important thing.
Yeah. And the application to our young leaders, maybe you're in a position that you can impact or change if you sense that the mission of wherever you're serving is not aligned with that. And if it's not, then perhaps that's God nudging you to say, I think your gifts and talents and abilities can be best served in an organization that is on mission. And so constantly asking that question, and sometimes it's a misfit. It's not that you're not a good employee or that it's a bad institution. It's just a misfit. So find somewhere where you actually can flourish.
That institutional fit's so important. That's well said, Philip. Very well said.
It is.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, David. Really appreciate your wisdom and experiences. Thanks for sharing those with us today.
Well, I'm honored to be a part of the program. Thank you for the conversation. I've greatly enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And in our session or in our episode description, you can find a link to David Dockery, who's there at Southwestern, as well as to IACE. And we'll also throw in a couple links to some of the books that you've authored, which touches on a lot of this subject matter in biblical and theological higher education. So until next time, stay kingdom focused.